This slide reviews the different types of slope. We have our positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, and undefined. The graphs we're going to be using today are going to be positive or negative slope. As we're finding slope from a graph, we have two options. We can use the slope formula, or we can count using rise over run, both of which will be explained. Take this page down for notes. On our first graph, we're going to find slope first using our slope formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We need to choose two pretty points where the line crosses exactly in a corner. Our ordered pair that we're going to use for x1, y1 is going to be point 0, negative 3, and the one we're going to use for x2, y2 is going to be point 3, 3. Now let's plug that into our formula and solve for the slope. First we're going to do y2 minus y1, so 3 minus negative 3. And then we're going to do x2 minus x1, so 3 minus 0. Now we solve. 3 minus negative 3 is 6. 3 minus 0 is 3. And we can simplify that down to a positive slope of 3. Now we're going to look at that same graph using rise over run. Rise is the change in your y's, and your runs is the changes in your x's. We have to make sure we pay attention to how the graph is numbered. So first, we're going to look at our change in y, which is our rise, which is the going up or down. In this case, I'm going to go up, and I'm going to count the spaces as I go up. I went up 6 spaces, so that's going to be a positive 6. And now I'm going to travel to the right, and I traveled right 3 spaces, so that's going to be a positive 3. So my change in y is 6, my change in x is 3, and 6 over 3 can be simplified down to 3 over 1, which still gives us our positive slope of 3. Now let's look at this graph. This time again, we're going to use our slope formula first. We need to find our pretty points. On this graph for pretty points, we have a bunch of options, but we're going to use the ones I labeled 1 and 2. For x1, y1, that ordered pair is negative 2, positive 4. And x2, y2 is 2, negative 4. So now let's plug that into our slope formula, y2 minus y1. So for y2, we have negative 4. For y1, we have positive 4. For x2, we have positive 2. And for y2, we have negative 2. And now we solve. Negative 4 minus 4 gives us negative 8. And 2 minus negative 2 gives us positive 4, which this can be simplified down to a slope of negative 2. And if you get a negative slope, make sure that you double check that your graph is going down, which ours is, so a negative slope is correct. Now we're going to look at that same graph and find it using rise over run. This time I chose 2 points that are a little bit closer together. And remember, we've got to pay attention to how our graph is numbered. So first, let's look at our change in y, which is our rise. I traveled down technically 2 spaces, but my graph is numbered by 2's, so my change in y is negative 4. Now let's look at our change in x. For our change in x, we went to the right 2 spaces, but the x-axis is labeled by 1's, so my change in x is 2. So I can simplify this down to negative 2 over 1, which still gives us our slope of negative 2. All right, on this graph, we're going to start again with our slope formula, y2 over y1 minus x2 minus x1. Our first ordered pair is going to be 1, 20, and our second ordered pair is going to be 3, 60. So we're going to plug that into our slope formula, y2, 60, minus y1, 20, over x2, 3, minus x1, 1. Now we solve. So we get 40 over 2. So our slope is a slope of 20. Now we're going to look at that same graph using rise over run. Again, we got to pay attention to how our axes are numbered. Our y-axis is numbered by tens, and our x-axis is numbered by ones. First, let's look at our change in y, which is our rise. So I went up 4 spaces, but I have to count by 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40. So I went up 40, so my change in y is positive 40. Now let's look at our change in x. For our change in x, we went right 2 spaces, and since it's numbered by ones, our change in x is plus 2. So this can be simplified down to 20 over 1, which gives us our slope of 20. So we're going to use the slope formula to find the slope on this graph. First, we need to find our 2 pretty points. All right, so our first ordered pair, we're going to use 0, 21. And for our second ordered pair, we're going to use 5, 18. So we're going to do y2 minus y1. So we're going to do 18 minus 21 over x2 over minus x1. So 5 minus 0. So 18 minus 21 is negative 3. And 5 minus 0 is 5. Now, we can leave this one in a fraction just like this because we usually leave slopes as fractions, not as decimals. So leaving it as negative 3 over 5 is perfectly fine. Now we're going to look at that same graph using our rise over run. So first we're going to look at our rise, and our y-axis is numbered by 3s. I technically went down 2 spaces, but again, I'm going down by 3s. So my change in y is going to be minus 6. Now let's look at our change in x. Our change in x with the point that I used this time, I went right 10. So my change in x is going to be plus 10. And this can be simplified down to the same slope we already got, which was negative 3 over 5. So our slope for this graph is negative 3/5.